Alright, so we're back with more Destiny 2 updates, some news, some clarification from Bungie, as well as a look at upcoming content, and a few other things. So Bungie go into a little bit more detail regarding the upcoming seasonal hub changes, our ability to farm Bright Dust in Renegades. We'll additionally talk about some packages that we'll be able to unlock for Renegades to give us a head start earning new rewards, hidden armor that we'll get access to in the future, as well as updates to the portal which Bungie originally outlined for around the Renegades timeline that'll introduce 6-player activities. Plus there's more conversation and drama about the state of Destiny and how the community and content creators play into that. So some interesting things today. If you guys enjoy the video, a rating very much helps us out, but now let's get into it. Just a couple of days ago, Bungie outlined their changes for the seasonal hub that we'll see when Renegades drops. This includes new objectives, which kind of just truncate the bounty and seasonal challenge system further into the seasonal hub. In many ways, it's another iteration on a system that we've seen a few different versions of. A big part of Bungie's focus introducing the season hub changes, though, are the ability to farm Bright Dust. So players asked for clarification on this, and whether we are actually capped in terms of our ability to get Bright Dust in this new system. And Bungie said you will be able to grind for hours and hours for Bright Dust in the new orders system. There's no hard cap that prevents you earning additional Bright Dust from legendary orders. However, you can expect your Bright Dust earnings to be slower once you've exhausted your most valuable orders. And so with this system, there is no specific lockout on our ability to earn Bright Dust, but it does essentially throttle in that the higher level objectives that we'll get on a weekly basis will give the most Bright Dust, and then lower level objectives, which will be the sort of standard, will drop considerably less Bright Dust, of course. I personally have underestimated just how much a lot of players do want to farm Bright Dust, but hopefully nonetheless this will improve things over where we're currently at. It's kind of hard to get a sense, on paper at least, exactly how all of this will feel, so I guess we'll see in Renegades, but again, give us any impressions you may have on it down below. Something I wanted to talk about here briefly, a quick mention related to Festival of the Lost Armor, and some of you guys asked me about my thumbnail in the Festival Eververse video last week, as I had a preview of this armor ornament. Interestingly, going back to the Festival of the Lost Armor vote for this year, this was the alternate theme for the Titan, which actually lost the vote, but interestingly, before Festival launched, the preview for the Titan armor set actually showed the one that didn't get the community vote. I hadn't put 2 and 2 together at the time I made the video and just kind of assumed this would end up in the game. Obviously, Bungie have actually made this set of armor, and that's why we can actually see it rendered in the game. So I'm assuming, like last year, Bungie will later release the armor sets that didn't win the vote, and have in fact already made them, or at least some of it, by the looks of things. So it probably will be a thing. After Festival went live, Bungie updated all of the visuals in the database for the armor set, so the Titan set now displays the correct one. But even then, other interesting things include the Slasher Shell, and that's the ghost that we get on the event track, which actually matches the Hunter armor that didn't win the vote incredibly closely. So I'd assume that that was potentially reworked into the shell instead. Just an interesting thing to highlight. Obviously didn't want to mislead anybody. I just kind of assumed that these were going to be released with Festival of the Lost nonetheless, but they probably will be released in the near future. In relation to Festival, some folks have pointed out there were more people actually playing when Festival launched than during the Epic Raid, which is interesting statistically, but not necessarily surprising, as obviously Festival has much broader appeal than the Epic Raid specifically. And overall, Festival has been a relative success. I think the new activity content is pretty awesome. Somebody also pointed out the hats that you can pick up in the Haunted Altars of Sorrow can ultimately more than double your damage. It's also possible to equip up to 56 stacks of the hat damage buff, which is pretty bonkers. So they're definitely worth picking up if you have the opportunity. Otherwise, as Bungie have discussed a couple of times recently, we're getting this Call to Arms event at the end of the season. We've discussed that more than once, so we won't reiterate too much about it, but one thing we didn't have a lot of info on were the rewards that would actually carry into Renegades, which Bungie teased. Colin Deeks shared that when Call to Arms goes live, we'll essentially earn packages that we'll be able to hold on to until Renegades releases. And as we can see here from the text string, they can be opened after the release of the next season or major updates. So we won't technically get Renegades loot early, although Bungie didn't ever promise that as far as I know. Nonetheless, it will mean that we can hold on to some packages, open them when Renegades drops, and get a further boost to our rewards. Obviously, if you are near to the maximum power level or over 450 power, that may be less impactful when we get to the expansion, as we should be earning higher tier loot almost immediately when we get into it. But it's something else to bear in mind, and that begins on November 11th, referring specifically to the Call to Arms event, so that's the same day Festival ends, given that Bungie have extended it. There's also been conversation about Bungie's recent comments on various updates they've dropped in the last week, where they'd said they gave us that big stack of unstable cores the week before they deprecated them, just because they didn't want players to be limited in terms of infusion and build crafting, until they made the additional change, which is now live, and unstable cores are basically entirely useless. Importantly though, as I mentioned earlier in the week, the devs did say and recognize that they have a lot more work to do in regards to Destiny 2, and they understand player anxiety and are doing what they can to rebuild some trust. So, as we said, this is a bit more candid in relation to Bungie's language around the game, which is good to see, and I'm curious what kind of updates and additional changes they're going to announce for Renegades, which I assume we will start to hear about pretty soon. One of those things may be an update to the portal, which includes something called Flashpoint Ops. Now, Bungie outlined this when they originally spoke about the portal, describing Flashpoint Ops as a 6-player activity category for match-made and pre-made groups, planned for a future season. And they said the category will be introduced later in the Year of Prophecy, featuring more chaotic 6-player combat-like offensives. So that would technically include things like the festival mode we have now, and basically older 6-player seasonal activities, I assume. And I'd definitely like to see more 6-player modes in the game again. I do worry slightly that having 5 different portal categories may actually be too many, and maybe Flashpoint Ops would be better placed as featured activities in the Fireteam Ops category or something like that. Obviously, there could be further issues with player population and matchmaking if Bungie don't kind of truncate them or rework Fireteam Ops to include that. Obviously, we hope for many more updates to the portal. Some players would ask Bungie to completely remove it. I don't think that's necessarily likely to happen, and it's certainly not realistic in the time frame for Year of Prophecy, although they can significantly improve it. So we'll see what we get. Another thing they'd spoken about were, of course, raids, where Bungie originally spoke about the unique challenges of raid content being in the portal, but did say, however, that they're excited to get the content into the portal offering in future, so that's another potential update at some point. A last bit of conversation right here, highlighting this comment. I've actually seen this sentiment echoed by a few different people, but Hiya Hyper on X said, don't let any of the content creators that shill for Bungie on a daily basis gaslight you into thinking that the death of Destiny 2 is the community's fault. The reality is that the devs refused to acknowledge feedback long after the damage was done and destroyed our trust. And I generally agree with that statement. I'm not sure who they're referencing specifically there. Obviously, there are creators and players in the community in general who are more likely to criticize Bungie than others. And given that this is ultimately an ecosystem, there's a component of the way the community behaves, the way Bungie behave, the way the game is going, all affecting that ecosystem in general, right? Before anyone calls me out, however, it is absolutely true that the state of Destiny, the game, cannot be blamed on the community. As a general rule, and I've said it a few times, we don't need to bite each other's heads off because some of us enjoy the game more than others, or that we have different opinions about the state of Destiny right now, or things that would make it better. And as Nighthawk said right here, the amount of people who can't let someone enjoy the new ornament set or have fun with Festival of the Lost is wild. Ultimately saying, let people enjoy what they want. And again, I totally agree with that. If you enjoy the game, you enjoy the game. If you don't have fun with it, that's absolutely fine too. It's none of our faults. I also have that component because I can be pretty critical of Bungie, that sometimes folks will say, you're being overly negative, or why don't you talk more about the positive sides of the game? Obviously, I'm not flawless, but I do my best to give Bungie credit where it is due, and to give constructive criticism, which I think the majority of the time I manage to do that. There's a side effect of making critical content where, for people who are having fun and are kind of burnt out hearing about negativity in one form or another, obviously that can impact how much fun you feel you'll actually have discussing the game, right? Because you might not want to focus on the negative things. For me, I just hope that not too many people draw conclusions about my general perspective on Destiny when I speak about an isolated issue. I spoke about the game-breaking bugs that we keep finding in releases a couple of days back. But that's not the same as saying, Festival of the Lost sucks, Bungie have killed the game. Objectivity can still exist, even in this day and age. We just have to be a little bit tolerant of the fact that we don't all think exactly the same thing all the time. That's my perspective on it. And without going off on any more of a tangent, I think in the world in general these days, everyone should try and pay a little bit less attention to each other and to opinions that differ from their own, right? I try and live as much as I can, which is, minimal, but I try and live in my own bubble, really. If I like something, I like it. I don't pay too much attention to people who would tell me I'm wrong. Why are they worrying about whether I'm right or wrong? If we can all think a bit more like that, then we'll probably enjoy ourselves generally more. For today, that's what we have to talk about. Give us your impressions and thoughts down below. If you did find the video interesting, a rating very much helps us out as well. And be sure to hit subscribe if you're new around here and you like the content, because that way I can keep you up to date with the game. Otherwise though, I hope you guys have an awesome day.